episode of Owning Her Health right before the holidays. I had a wonderful opportunity to speak to Kenyora Parham from EndROC and Rape on Campus, the director over there, as well as her work with C-Suite Living Color, which is just blossoming as her side hustle that you're going to hear her story, how she flipped her pain into that, and all of it as it's coming. And I just thought she was such a great example of a social healer, a woman coming into her own, learning through her own story, one of these medicine women rising outside of the healthcare realm, as well as somebody to know because she is one of those shining, diamonds in the rough that is going places. This is not the episode to miss at all.
Join Lisa as she starts the conversation on what it really takes to become a healthy, wealthy, and whole CEO of your life. Listen in to Real Talk by real lady leaders in all walks of life as they open up on personal health stories, wealth, career, and feminine abundant living. Learn how to grow by owning your body, expanding your mind, and aligning your soul with the purpose only you can pursue in this world. Happiness begins with
Wonderful,
owning
everyone.
her health
Thanks
right
again.
now.
Listening to the intro, I have Kenyora Parham from she's two things. She's with you call it EndROC, I think, right? For the End Rape on EndROC?
And Rape on Campus.
EndROC. Okay. EndROC for EndROC and End Rape on Campus. And then she's got her own thing going on, which she has in Living Color, which to me as a Generation Xer, I get kind of this thought of the In Living Color with the Fly Girls and things like that type of show. But what she's doing is she's bringing an executive presence and a voice for really, these microaggressions and inequity gaps that we're calling a lot of, inclusion and diversity and things like that. But we were having a discussion before this when we were planning this show. And really, it's kind of filling in those inequity gaps that I think, people kind of get blind to sometimes when we're focusing on just the equality and just the numbers in wherever, but actually, are we actually making it accessible and making sure that the people who are going into different environments know the game? So I'm excited to talk to you today, Kenyora. I'm going to flip it over to you because you know your stages the best. Give us a little synopsis of how you went from whatever you were studying in college to doing the social activist and social healing work that you're doing now, and to even planning your vision moving forward into the new year. How did that come about? Because that's not the path for everyone.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on your show. It's definitely an honor, especially to be able to just share my voice and share my story. So before I even got into the activism space, I actually wanted to be an architectural engineer.
I love it. I love these stories because it's
I wanted to build those skyscrapers. I wanted to do interior designing work. I wanted to get my hands dirty, so to speak. But I think life had other plans for me in ways of getting my hands dirty. So I went to Simmons College, now Simmons University, studied public health with a sociology track. And it was there that I actually grew my love for just epidemiology and public health and what that means and what that looks like. But I also have experienced sexual assault as a child through my campus experience in my collegiate years. And something in the, I don't know, winds.
the ethos.
Exactly. It essentially propelled me into diving more into my studies and going on that social work pathway. So immediately after I graduated from Simmons, I went into the fall straight into Boston University School of Social Work to get my MSW, where I also got group work specialization. So I have a certificate in that. And it was during that time where I just was working from the elderly population, then switched over to doing some youth development work. And it was in the youth development work where I was like, women and girls. Like I've been surrounded my entire life in women-centered spaces because Simmons is a women-centered
Mhm.
college. And we know social work is typically a predominantly female field. It just felt like that was an area that I really wanted to dive into. So women and girls, especially those at the intersections of their identities. And so I went to school full time for 2 years doing for my MSW, and in my second year, was working full time as a program manager with Strong Women, Strong Girls, which is a multi-generational mentoring organization located in Boston. And that's really where I got my foundational work from nonprofit sector, from the governance to fundraising to program development, pretty much everything you think about in nonprofit. I had my hand in a little bit of everything. So I really got my kind of education, if you will, into the nonprofit world through that organization, and really had a love for it in terms of managing different college women who was serving as mentors for the elementary school girls, and then professional women who were serving as mentors for the college women. So really this multi-generational cycle of mentoring and empowering girls to recognize that they can literally do and be anything they want to be. And that there are so many women and girls at the intersections who have, demonstrated beyond their
Mhm.
bounds and their means at times. And so we've always highlighted different women and girls in history, like Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, or even local women who have different local businesses, so that way girls knew who was in their communities. Um, and so I was there for about 5 years, but then in my final years at Strong Women, Strong Girls, had experienced some organizational trauma, particularly around racial discrimination, microaggressions, biases, gaslighting. And at the time, didn't know that it was gaslighting. Didn't even know that that was even a term.
Right.
And then I knew I had to basically remove myself from the
Mhm.
organization that I love near and dear, because it just the supervisor I had at that time, who wasn't there for the entire majority of my career there, but in the final years, really just I was like, it's time for me to go. I don't want to get into too much of
Mhm.
the details of
Yeah, of
that
course.
particular experience, but I essentially knew that I wanted to get into higher education space because at Strong Women, Strong Girls, we worked with multiple colleges and universities. And so I said, let me see what the other side of that looks like. And I ended up becoming the assistant director of pre-college programs at Brandeis University.
Mm.
Was there for 2 years, running 4 different summer residential programs for high school students and giving them that college life experience for a few weeks. But it was then again there that I was experiencing more organizational trauma with respect to racial discrimination and microaggressions. And this time around, it was seeping into the team space, meaning I would have active arguments in front of my team members with my boss at the time. And it was at a point where even my team had to step in, in support of me to say, hey, look, like, this is what she's talking about. This is what she means. Like, it was a lot of, you know, that's when I learned the term gaslighting, that was happening for me, where I'd be told, no, you're just confused about these things. I'm like, that's not what's happening. That's actually not
Right.
what's going on here. So I was only there for about 2 years, because literally at that point I was losing weight. Like I was losing almost my mind, if you will. I knew I had to get out of there. And at the time, I was also planning my wedding, my first year at Brandeis. And so I was newly married, all of that. And my husband, who happens to be from Alabama, he's not Massachusetts born like me. I'm from Lynn, Massachusetts. He was like, why not, like, let's go somewhere else, like in a different state. And I never really thought about that. I was like, you know what? Yeah, let me get out of my bubble. I know Boston like the back of my hand. I know like Massachusetts. I know the New England area. Let me get out. And so we had this deal of whoever had got the job first. Basically, that's where we're moving to. So I ended up getting the staff director, chief of staff position at EndROC on campus. And in that position was where I really actually discovered that, oh, wait, what I have experienced as a child, what I experienced back in college, like these things actually happened to me. I'm a survivor. It never was a label that I had until I got into this space. But in that particular role, I was also able to not only figure out those things for me personally, but also to create a work environment that I always wanted, but didn't really get to have just due to the experiences that I experienced in my previous jobs. And so I was working my way, trying to figure out what that looks like with the team that I had at that point. And then a year later, just before COVID, we almost had to close our doors just due to some decisions that were made through leadership, where we had to downsize from about, I can't even remember how many staff members in total we had, but we had at least 7, maybe 8 of us. And it went straight from that number down to just myself.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. So
It's like,
it was
at
a lot.
least give you the $5 extra a month.
Well, yeah, well, we won't go into that piece because, yeah, that was a whole.
That's how it happens, right?
So
'Cause it's
bad.
like,
Right. And this was like a couple of months before COVID.
ugh.
So we go on transition into COVID and we're still trying to figure out like what the situation was. Let's figure this out. And luckily enough, Civic Nation took us under their wing, and now EndROC on Campus is an initiative of Civic Nation, like fully embedded into it, not a fiscal sponsorship. We're part of the Civic Nation family, but for about a year and a half, I basically rebuilt up EndROC on Campus, holding the multiple hats that I had to hold. And it wasn't until a year and a half that I was able to hire my first team member.
Wow.
And now I'm a team, including myself, of 3.5. And I say 3.5 because we have a part-time graduate student who serves as our program assistant and is only with us for about a year now. But yeah.
Wow. I mean, so as you're hearing yourself say this, because one of my intentions with this show is, not only to say that, show women who sort of like owned their well-being and did something with that, but like just to have those same women hear ourselves, because so many times we're kind of like crisis managing, getting through and whatever. And then when you sort of like hear yourself right now with all that you've done, what do you hear?
I hear a lot. If anything, I hear that I think my life, it's like serendipity is the word that comes to mind for me, is like based off of my upbringing, being, a very maternal household. When I said women-centered spaces, like I'm an alum of Girls Incorporated, of WIN. And so I think a lot of what I've experienced as a younger child and through teenage years, adulthood, just stepping stones in order for me to get to even the positions that I'm in now, and being able to compartmentalize things and move things forward in ways that, if you had asked me or said to me, you're going to be in ED in like the next like 3 years, like, from Strong Women, Strong Girls, I would have been looking at you like, no, what are you talking about?
Right. And I love that because that's such they talk about Campbell's hero's journey, but I think there's this other thing that's emerged. This medicine woman rising is sort of what I've been calling it the past few years, where I meet somebody like you and you're really like a social healer. You're a modern day medicine woman. I was only meeting them in my circles of, health and well-being for a good chunk of, my clinical career, of course, because that's who I was around, but I think that's who sort of went into the first phase. But now, especially since the pandemic, and I would have to say, even that whole Me Too time, 2018, 19, I've
Yeah.
just seen the medicine women coming out now from all industries. And, a lot of us were therapists or caregivers in some way, but they're coming out of the social, institutions and, these pillars of like, government and governance and all of this. So, but it's a similar story to you. It's like this serendipitous, this is why I feel like it's sort of this divine sort of thing, this bigger thing than we even understand, because I don't know about you, but myself and other women I've spoken to, it's like you're kind of like doing these things and you're like, I'm kind of being guided, or like I'm able to do this, but it's not like this solid thing, like you said. It's not like you're living your whole life being like, when I grow up, I'm gonna be this, as so many other men and women maybe do, right? And then they go and they do that, whether they're happy or not. It's this something, this sort of spirit led something in us. So, but it does take trust. It does take contribution. It does take that. So I just love it. I mean, it's amazing. How old are you? Can I ask how old are you?
Yeah, I'm 34.
34 years, so anybody listening to this, like I think sometimes we think, I don't know. We have this like weird sense of time space continuum, which is completely made up, by the way. But you know, we think, oh, we could do all of these amazing things, and we're supposed to do them by like, right, 40 years old. And then all of a sudden we turn 40 and we're like, life's over. We can't do anything. Like, oh my God, it's been 5 years and I haven't, whatever. And it's just refreshing, right? We have to remember. And I think one of the things I love of what you were in with the programs is like that multi-generation. We've lost that. So we're almost forgetting, like,
Yes.
to see that woman, like we see her and we're so into this, like staying young, and like we've forgotten, wait a minute. Like when I turn into this maven,
Mhm.
I have, you're moving now into these years of like maven power, the wisdom years. You know what
Yes.
I mean? And it's weird because we've kind of moved that into also mother years and also maven years. Like we're trying to figure out this thing. Um,
Mhm.
where, if you could talk to, so like, that maidenhood we are all sort of trained into and has been pushed everlastingly forward, which I think is to the determinant from all of our health and well-being. But in that maidenhood, in those years of, like you were saying, I didn't know gaslighting, I didn't know all of these things. What the woman now
Mhm.
in her mid 30s, what would you tell the woman 10, 15 years ago, that teen adolescent, that older adolescent moving into her kind of maiden fire, gonna go out there, do my thing?
I probably would have told her to start with the resistance then,
Mm,
meaning like when I was particularly in high school, I loved my high school years. Like absolutely loved my
me
high
too.
school.
I was Little Miss High School.
I graduated as part of the top of the class. Like I did a little bit of everything. But
Yeah.
I think I was also in a way sheltered from what was going on around me, and recognizing that the trauma of things, whether it was through what I witnessed as a child, what I experienced as a child, what I've known about friends or other family members, and not to say that, like, as a teenager, you should be a teenager. You shouldn't have to put any weight on your shoulders about what's happening in this world. But I think I probably would have gotten started earlier with making a change and doing something about it, especially in Lynn, Massachusetts, that tends to have a negative connotation surrounded by it. And still does. Like people think about it as the Sin City, and not Las Vegas, like completely different.
Right, right. They have a different image.
Different image of Lynn, and I'm proud to be from Lynn, Massachusetts. And I still have my family's still there. I still have friends there, and I go back and visit. But I think I would have done something, I think I would have done something more. So I would have told my younger self that it's okay to have started something then. Like when
Mhm.
you were thinking about what you were thinking about, do that.
Oh, so was she kind of thinking of some of these things?
Yeah.
Like, oh wow, that's amazing.
But not
Yeah,
recognizing I guess the national magnitude in the movement around it that
right.
has always existed, because you hear about things in history books, so you just think, oh, that's history, but
Right.
not knowing that no, this is also happening present day, and you could be a part of that change.
Yeah, that's the way it was kind of taught, right? Like bringing up my children in the South, I grew up in the New York tri-state area, big blue state, coming down to Charlotte, big
Mhm.
red state. And but what actually I was impressed with was how much better American history. They such a different story being from the North versus
Yes,
the South. And they
yes.
got a much more holistic story of the North and the South. Up North, it's like very little, right? Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, but like I didn't get the whole
We got
story,
the
like,
surface. We got the surface level stories. Like I'm still learning things from my husband, and I was like,
right.
did you learn that then?
Really appreciating like
Mhm.
wow, how where you grow up, right? You get this whole story and forget about it being a Puerto Rican. I mean, apparently there was, until J Lo came on the scene, no Puerto Ricans contributed anything into anything. It's almost overwhelming, like to my daughter who's 23. Like it's just too much to as much as I tried to shield her, it's too much. She's overwhelmed and her nervous system can't freaking even take it, even if she thinks so much like you.
Mhm.
But like she did counseling in her undergrad. She had to take off a year just now because she can't go on. Like I
Mhm.
feel for her in this world, and I feel like women like us, we really do. We need to kind of like step up to kind of grab them and
Yeah.
heal them
Mhm.
through the process. Because like for us, somehow we were sort of like we're healing, but later, but we were still productive. They need the healing to be productive.
Mhm.
You're successful really now with what you're doing, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the
Mhm.
ideas. I don't know how much to you want to talk about your new ideas, but
Mhm.
if this is successful and we go 10, 15 years in the future,
Mhm.
and that wise maiden sitting there, she's close to 50
Mhm.
and she's seen it, she's in the ethers right now.
Mhm.
What are you hearing from her?
Oh, she's
What are you
walking in
hearing
her
from her?
truth. She's walking in her truth unapologetically,
Beautiful.
walking in her truth and giving the space for others to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like with C-suite and living color,
Mm-hmm.
that it was an idea that I had for a while, and then it wasn't until 2020 when I experienced even a lot more organizational
Stuff.
trauma
Yeah.
and stuff.
I love the way you make it organizational trauma. Yeah.
Because it's beyond, the work that I do in my
Mhm.
full-time capacity at EndROC on campus as executive director, but it's the combination of, even when I say organizational trauma, I mean Twitter, our social media platforms, they're organizations.
Right.
We're being fed so much information, so much stimulus at one time. And what I've gathered is that, one, I wasn't the only one dealing with this type of organizational trauma, where I did want to become an executive director. And I had majority of my supervisors have always been white women. I've only had one person of color that I could tell you, and I'm still connected with her to this day.
Right.
She just happens to live literally like 2 streets down from me.
Well,
So
God plants little things
that
in the right place.
and I created C-suite and living color out of a sense of, I know I'm not the only person dealing with these things. How can I create a community in a space with other folks who not only look like me, but are at the intersections of their identity, are people of color who are aspiring to be an executive director, a CEO, and maybe not so much in their own entrepreneurial way, like
Right.
how
Like
we
it, yeah, interceptors, right? Like
but
industry disruptors and things.
exactly. Like, how do we, in the white spaces that we're predominantly in, be able to excel and push up and push against the grain? And what does it look like to have a community who helps us to navigate through the gaslightings, the microaggressions, versus always just putting things on Twitter or social media or the TikToks? But what does it mean to really truly be in support of one another? And so C-Suite and Live in Color is really about that transformative, what I like to call transformative reciprocity. So, having been a part of the Institute for Nonprofit, oh my gosh, they would kill me for saying this incorrectly because I'm always used to it being called Institute for Leadership and Nonprofit Management, but now they changed their name to Institute for Nonprofit Practice. Absolutely amazing organization that I had the chance to be a part of when I was at Strong Women, Strong Girls. And that was the pinnacle part for me that kind of changed my trajectory and what allowed me to say, okay, I need to get out of SWG. I'm so much more and bigger than what's happening right now. I can do so much more. And it was through this program that I was able to be a part of a cohort of other folks who are young, emerging leaders, where we were able to provide that peer-to-peer support for one another when we're presenting an issue. So we would say, here's what I'm dealing with at my job, and folks we'd help each other out with that in addition to the workshops and training.
So it sounds like a traditional mastermind.
Yes.
Mastermind.
Yes. And for a very small cohort. So it was that concept of that I experienced. I was like, this is what I would want to do for folks who are just trying to navigate through predominantly white organizations and are trying to even maybe not be C-suite, but just trying to get to that next maybe assistant director level or director level, or maybe EVP, whatever that looks like. So while creating that kind of space, I also wanted this to be a consultant business where I can work with organizations to help them engage in more effective systems and solutions that allow for folks, especially, folks at the intersections of their identities, to move up and to create those spaces that create that sense of belonging and that create that sense of, we value the skills that you bring and the experiences you bring, and allows them to have high retention rates.
Right. Yeah, because you almost have to do, I'm listening to you and I'm like, yes, that's what I'm talking about with women, like just in general, like the same thing. It's the microaggressions. It's like all these it's the same kind of dealing with other people's insecurities, dealing with other people's ignorance and our own, except only one side is owning the responsibility of seeing it, working on it, and whatever. And it's got to be both sides, right? It's got to be both sides to work. And yeah, and having these masterminds and understanding what a true mastermind is. I just created an ethos level to do that one-on-one with give them the introduction of that. And then also I'm trying to gather my 8 to 10 women like you, because I see like, if we can be in the same rooms together, put the thing on the table and come with look at this whole batch of experience that you bring, right? And whatever, this is what's going to speed up and fill in, like I said, those inequity gaps, because equality, we got enough equality right now to have you in your position and this and that. It's not optimal, but it's the equity we're missing. We're getting blind to this.
Absolutely.
Right? We're putting people in positions and this and that. But like you said, then it becomes this place. Now you got to make another organization instead of have that organization that's doing it. Now you got to make another organization. It's like if we could just learn to sort of, right? Like see the gap, not feel like somebody, it's not a sum zero freaking game.
It's really about being human centered. Like,
yes.
I'm tired of the DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusion. Like that should have already been embedded in organizations.
Right? In kindergarten.
Like everywhere, right? Like it's really about how do we treat each other with kindness, empathy, care, and not as just a business transaction, and not as a number, and not as a means to an end. Like we're human. we're supposed to have interaction and that sense of belonging in order for us to just exist and be alive. Like, and so if
Right.
we even have like the basic needs of what it means to just be in existence, like that is what like I'm trying to tackle is
Right. That's because that's what we're like the psychological needs, the hierarchy of needs psychologically, you just in general, socially, like it's all science. Like it's all like we all have it. It's like, but like integrating it into it. And I said this the other day in a post. I was like, well, of course, we're leaving relationship to AI and technology. So of course we're losing the humanity in it. And it's to the place where it's just like the people who either want to be humans or the people that want to be cyborgs.
right.
And and it is difficult. I get you because it's difficult and you're just like, I don't understand why you can't get this. Like
Mm,
it's like why do humans have this human condition? And it goes back to right the ego and everything. It's like, why are you of the belief that this entire universe was made for you? Like
right.
what makes you think this? Like
Where did
there's
that
no
come from?
evidence.
Exactly. Exactly. And
and
why do you feel like you have to have all the power? Why can't you share the power? Share like the resources, share what's out there. Like
yeah,
I
and it's the fragility is across the
oof,
board.
oof,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? The fragility is across the board. It's not just like what
Mm,
everybody's freaking fragile now, which is why you can't hold the mastermind because
yeah.
somebody gets feedback and all of a sudden they're like
Mm,
triggered
mm,
because we do. And I'm not saying don't be triggered, but it's like, well, okay. So do you see why maybe you need the counseling in addition to building your business? Like do you see like this whole thing of personal development was so external and so competitive, and
mm,
we all know that that's the main structure, right? But it's run its end, and why I'm trying to develop a culture of curves and grace as
yes.
opposed to grind and walk the line. We know how to do this. We learned it, but we also, some of us somehow, and I'd have to believe at this point because of what's gone on, and you watch other people and you're like, I don't
Mm,
understand how you turned out. Like even in your own house, you're like, how did you turn that way? We got the same genes going on. And it's got to be God blessed, right? So like we're here being like, let's change this. I
mhm,
call it the curvy hustle, this cultural, like I want to be like FUBU, like just come in with the whole thing. Like this is how we, our fashion, our lifestyle, our this,
yes.
because then
Mm,
it'll cross the line because it's the same conversation we're having. It's
mhm,
just that we have to sort of, right? We have our niches and this and that. But
mhm,
it's about the human condition, which is
mhm.
why I called it Mind Body Brand Academy, because it's like you need your mind and body there because we gotta stop making leaders in title alone. The
100%.
character traits, my gosh, why can't we get this?
Yeah.
you know?
Honestly, just sometimes people think that they're in a leadership position and it it does elevate you because of the title, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're encompassing all the skills. And I'm not saying this for everybody. I'm saying this for the people who think that they or need all the control, or that they think they have to be the helicopter manager or the charismatic leader, which has its pros and cons there. But I think sometimes people forget that a title is just a title. And just because you have the title doesn't mean that you then have to be a horrible person to someone who's quote unquote beneath you. Or
Right.
that you have to be
Right. They
the
gotta suffer. This isn't pledging, okay? Like this is
yeah, exactly that. Like it's not that. And I'm a part of a sorority,
right.
like, and you know what I mean? And so it's one of those things where I just people think titles and like, oh, now I earn, now you have to give me respect because I have this title. No, you have
It's
to
the
earn.
entitlement. It's
Yeah,
the
like
entitlement. I mean, we name things all the time. I listen to my gut. I've got a gut feeling. like we name things like we know something, but then we don't act like we know about it.
Mhm.
Like we called it in the title, in the title, ego, edging God out. I mean, come on, like,
Yes. Yes.
so it's like, I hear you. I mean, we could talk for days on this because it really does come back. And the things I heard, from you is, uh, can we create these safe spaces where we can, like, at some point along the line, we stopped evolving in terms of again, it's this, it's social healing. It's a social, and in order to that, you need the people to be healed. And in order for that, this gets back to the food. This gets back to the maternal health. This gets back to in utero, your mother's eggs, your dad's sperm. I mean, like, it really is this thing. And it can be overwhelming, which is why I think, the leaders need to really reconnect. But, to like you said, we've made leaders in name alone and in nepotisms and in payments. I want to live where we're not in survival mode.
Exactly. I just want to be myself. I don't, even when people be like, oh, are you going to be at NBA on campus for long? And I'm like, I don't want anyone to be in this space for long. This is something that, like, should not be someone's life's work, because there's so much that we can do to change the things, whether it's from policy to how we treat each other, human behavior. Like, there's so much that can be done, the support that we provide to folks. And yet, for whatever reason, it's like our country, our world feeds off of trauma and like violence. And it's like the means to an end. And I will never ever understand violence. Like, don't get me wrong,
Right.
I can totally understand why people can become
Get
violent
violent. Right.
and get
Right.
violent. But I will never understand it as a way to gain control, gain power. If someone comes at you incorrectly, I think I just read an article just a couple of days ago where someone was shot just simply because they held the door open for a group of women in an elevator. Like, are you
Right. Like, it's
kidding
getting
me?
to the point where, like I said, with the fragility, it's like, we need to have that space of,
Yeah.
like, I'm ready to just, let's unleash if I can bring a bunch of hippies in and they can get everybody hugging trees for just one moment, like, I like whatever we need at this point. Like, if we need a bunch of toddlers there just to play around us and we can, like, look through their eyes of wonder, because it's like, it's the bare basic stuff. And it's leadership, relationship, that's my tenet: leadership, relationship, and and like this, I call it kind of a spiritual power, but just this purpose driven sort of,
Mm,
I see spirituality as the deepest, most intimate relationship with me.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and at that point, getting deeper, I understand my divinity. I understand my oneness is actually allness, and things like that. But you got to be able to go within and self reflect. And when somebody shows you a mirror, you don't break the mirror, you
Mm,
look in the mirror, like, to be brave enough for that. Because, like, it is like we're getting so angry, it's the complete opposite: loss of control. it's
mhm,
it's not control, it's loss of control. It's
mm,
not strength to be stoic and not feeling about anything. You're called freaking the Terminator at that point. Like, it's like, you know what I mean, like, it's, let's,
yes.
and the scary thing is we have all these, like, sci-fi flicks and dystopia books that's like, if you can think it, it can be it. And I feel like some people are so creative that they're just like, let's be it. And I'm like, no, no, no.
Yeah,
Did you read the
no,
last chapter? Did you keep the
yeah,
focus to read the last chapter?
right. Like, I don't need the Handmaid's Tale coming to life.
Yeah, I
Like,
like, let's not explore that. Let's just learn from it and be like, let's not do that, right? Like,
yeah.
and that's why I say, like, look at the Bible, whether you believe it's your God or real or whatever. But, like, let's, like I always say, like, even if some guy Jimmy wrote that thing, Jimmy Jimmy's got a pretty good story there, pretty good handbook about just self-reflection and self-discovery. Like, let's look at the Vedas, let's look at the Torah, let's look, because these are books that have stayed the test of time. And in a world that's so disposable, that's
Yeah,
got to start meaning something.
exactly. Exactly.
It's like, I feel like God
Exactly.
sits there, like, if you believe in, like, this source or whatever, just sits there and is just like, Man, I didn't even see that coming. Like, wow, they're so creative. Like, what are we going to do with this? And just studying us. So to finish things up, because like we could have like 5 episodes. I want to have a podcast now with you because I think it would be amazing. Um, where can we find you? Where's the places to connect with you? And what is it you need? What is it you see you need from anybody hearing this in case they could hook you up with that or connect with you? And where can we best connect with you?
Absolutely. So you can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, honestly, by name, Kenyora Parham. I'm on across all of my social. You can find me at Her Story K.
Love
Her
it.
Story K. I've had that, I think, ever since Twitter was a thing, ever since Instagram was a thing. I was like, I need to make sure that this is mine across all of the social medias. But if I would say if there's something that I would need, it's really to be connected with women who are not only in corporate sectors, but women who are in multiple fields, multiple industries, especially as it relates to sexual assault, sexual violence. Women, and I would even say men, I would even say people in general. Like I really want
Anyone who gets it.
that anyone who gets it, who is willing to be bold and innovative with me, especially in the next year. NRAPE on Campus is coming up on 10 years next year.
Wow.
And so I'm looking to what I'm calling shift the narrative in this space. And we have what's called a campus accountability map and tool that's essentially going to empower prospective and current students in their communities with the ability to compare sexual assault statistics, investigation policies, prevention efforts, and survivor support resources. So basically, I'm trying to have EndROC in this tool be that next best US News World Report, but with respect to safety, because no one's talking about safety.
Yeah, of course, because they're like, yeah, we got to cover that up or else you won't come. It's like, actually, maybe you should clean it up.
Yeah, exactly.
And then maybe we won't have it on the thing anymore.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm trying to change
That's
the way
amazing.
we talk about safety on campuses and making sure that students and their parents who may be paying for it, have the best informed decisions when they're getting ready
Right,
to.
because they sit there and they pay what, thousands of dollars to have their kid, researched for the best to get into the school. But what are you getting them into? Do you even know if they're going to be safe?
Exactly.
So that's amazing. That's amazing. Kenyora, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm going to have all your links that you get her on LinkedIn and all of her main links for her organizations and things that she mentioned on the show notes. So make sure you go on over to the Libsyn show notes. Give us an email, give us a feedback anytime, support at drlisahollandpt.com. I'd love to hear from you, or if you need anything in this circle, if you couldn't get it off of the show notes. Thank you so much, Kenyora. We're going to be talking to her more because she can be doing more stuff, and she's in my Curvy Hustle world that I'm creating on Web3.
Yeah.
So she's in there. So thank you so much. All right, guys, we will see you next time on another episode of Owning Her Health. Take care.
Thank you for listening into this episode of Owning Her Health with Dr. Lisa Holland. To learn more about her personal and professional development service, visit her online at drlisahollandpt.com.